All right, let's see how you did on this making a box plot of these 10 numbers. All right, so like I said, there were 10 numbers. So if you split those 10 numbers in half, you know you're going to have five on each side. Well, so look what that does then. Since I had an even number in that set of data with there being 10 items, then that puts five on the bottom and five on the top. So then this median is actually in between that fifth and sixth piece of data. So I average that, which the average of 70 and 72 is 71. Okay. All right, so then to find that Q1, I take this bottom five items and I find the median of those bottom five pieces of data, and that's 43 is the Q1. And then again, I take the top five and I find the median of the top five. So that 84 is the Q3. All right, so then that gives me my items here. Now, we then go find out if there are any fences, and in order to do that, we do our IQR first, which is Q3 minus Q1. That ended up being 41. So that's pretty broad spread for an IQR. All right, so then now let's find the fences. The lower fence is that Q1 minus 1.5 IQRs. And so when I plug in those numbers, I actually get a negative 18.5. So I can tell that there are no lower outliers because there is no data below the lower fence. Now the upper outlier fence is at plus Q3 plus 1.5 IQRs, and that ends up being at what 145.5. Okay, so the max being 106 tells me there's nothing above the upper fence. So you do not have any data below the lower fence or above the upper fence, so there are no outliers. So that makes it easy. Okay, I probably should have made it so that there were some, but you didn't get any. All right, so now let's graph. Scale, box, fences, whiskers, scale, box, fences, whiskers, scale, box, fences, whiskers. Put those outliers on. So what I did to figure out my scale, so here's the thought process you go through, is I think 106 minus 30. So that's quite a big span, 76. So I thought I was a little worried. I wasn't sure, but there are a lot of things down here. So with the minimum being 30, I tried, let me see if I start at 25. So 25, 30, and I just went by fives. And I ended up having enough room because I could get all the way up to 115 here or even 125. So I was good. And you don't have to have those fences on there. You just have to have your data on there. Okay, so that's one thing that's worth noting. All right, so here we go. We then, remember, scale box is next. So I'm going to do my box, which is from my Q3 to my Q1. So I put that box right here at 43 to 84 and put that median of 71 in between. See, I'm placing them in their correct location according to my scale because this has to be drawn to scale. Cannot just be willy-nilly stuck on there. You do not just put those 10 numbers down there. All right, then scale, box, fences. Well, the fence is way down here below that and way up here above that. So there are no outliers. So now I just go straight to whiskers. So my whisker, I do not have to worry about it crossing the fence or going to that next piece of data inside the fence, okay? Which in this case is that minimum of 30 and the max of 106. So label, label, label. Make sure you label all of those important points. All right, so there we go. That is that one. Okay, let's check and see how you did on this next one. Here we go. Okay, this one had 11 pieces of data. So 11 divided by 2 is 5.5. Okay, so then that told me, I'm going to have data piece number 6 as my median, and there it is. So I've got 5 on the bottom, 5 on the top, and then the Q1 and the Q3 are the center of those bottom halves and top half. There's our Q3 minus Q1 of 65. Now look, our fences ended up being way out there as well, and you ended up not having any outliers on this. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But um, here, okay, let's talk about scale. So we're going to do our scale, box, fences, whiskers, scale, box, fences, whiskers. So 341 to 199. So that's a span of about 150. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that here. So I started, oh, look, I started at 200, probably should have started at 195. And it looks like if I go by fives, that will take me past that. So that worked. And so then that was my scale. Then I just went ahead and put my box on from 236 to 301. Okay, and then I get that 278 in the middle for that median. And again, I had no outliers, had no data below the lower fence or above the upper fence, so I had no outliers, so I could just go ahead then and draw my whiskers. Now, let's just talk about that because I don't like that I gave you these two problems that didn't have outliers. I wish that I would have had you be able to practice that. So let's just say that I had a piece of data here that was, 400. Say we had 400 as a piece of data. And let's not go in, or maybe this 341, hey, maybe let's do that instead so that everything else stays the same. So let's say that instead of having 341, it was instead the number 400. Okay? All right. So that then says that our 400 is above the upper fence. Okay? So, of course, I would have to come on up here and I would have my fence. Let's see. Oh, I went by tens. Okay. So that'd been 390. So then 400 would have been about right here. Okay. 398 would have been that fence, probably about right here. 398 would have been that fence. Okay. And so then I have a piece of data that is an outlier. Okay. So 400 would have been an outlier. Now, if 400 is an outlier, okay, then don't you make your whisker go to that 400. You must make it go to the piece of data inside that fence. So if 341 is not your highest piece of data inside the fence and 303 is, then this just goes to 303. So the moral of the story is do not make your whisker go to the fence. If you have an outlier, your whisker goes to the next piece of data inside the fence. That's the important point. Okay, so hopefully you did okay on those practice examples, and we will get to some practice again on that tomorrow. And I do know those will have outliers, so you'll need to practice getting those whiskers to the next piece of data inside the fence.